Welcome to session 4 of Marital Concepts. In session 4, we're going to talk about what we call is staying power. Staying power. We're going to be talking about patience. And the writer in Galatians chapter 6 states this: "Let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we do not grow weary. So then, while we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, and especially to those who are of the household of the faith." Here's what I know, that wherever we're at in our relationship at the time determines a lot of what happens in our conflict or how we act as couples. Let me state it this way. If we wait until we are in conflict, or if we wait to the moment of conflict before we take care of certain things, things won't go well. So if we can back up to the times when we are not in conflict, when things are good, and we build our relationship and do the necessary things that it takes to build a marriage, then when we get to conflict, conflict's going to be easier. Conflict's going to be more calm. There are times anxiety is going to rise. You know, we learned that in the last session, that there's anxiety will come up. But it depends on what we did previous to that in our relationship is going to determine on how we act in that moment. So if we go back in our relationship and we look back and see how things are going, let's just say it's today. How are we building our relationship today? How are we building our marriage right now, today? From what you're learning in these sessions, if we go out of here and we begin to put these things into action, then what's going to happen is somewhere down the line you're going to be confronted with conflict, and however we learn, train, use these tools, these methods now, how we treat each other now is going to determine how we act whenever it comes time for real conflict. So, prepare now. Know that conflict's inevitable. And I love it to talk to these young premarital young kids when they're getting ready to get married. I've had them come in my office. I had one couple come into my office a few years ago. And this couple, she could do no wrong. He could do no wrong. His family was perfect. Her family was perfect. They went on and on and on about, oh, you just would not believe how great his family is. And I'm sitting back as this therapist, and I'm just letting them spend a session talking about how great each other is, how great their family is. And I'm thinking, something's getting ready to happen in you that's going to really rock your world. I'm just waiting on you to get done. And so I'm just waiting on them to get done with their conversation about how great, and I'm like, okay, now is the time. And so I just begin to dive in and stir up some things in their thought process, until at the end of that session, they were questioning on whether they really did, and it was jokingly. It wasn't like, you know, that they were mad at each other and that now they're not going to get married. But it opened their eyes to some things that might happen in a few years that I want to bring up in the onset of the relationship, and not get into the relationship and then find out, I wish he would have told me that. Because things happen. Life happens. Marriage happens. And it's really probably one of the hardest jobs you'll ever have. And so if we want to prepare, then we have to really look at today to get ready for tomorrow. And there's a lot of methods to do that. We're learning some of those now, but one of the things that we really have to focus on right now and be ready for when these things happen is patience. We need to learn some patience. One of my most difficult qualities is patience. And, you know, sometimes we just need to be patient while we're doing the right thing. Sometimes the right thing might not seem like it's working like it should. It's not getting any better right now. I don't see any progress. I don't see any things happening, but there are times when doing the right thing seems to take this long period of time before we start really experiencing the results. But if we continue to do the right thing over an extended period of time, it produces a healthy marriage. If we just continue, if we be patient and know and just trust the process, that if we continue these certain things over an extended period of time, we can build a healthy marriage. Now, there's three things that make it very difficult to be patient in a marriage. I believe there's three things that make it so difficult for you and I in our relationship to be patient. And the first thing is this, that one spouse is not fulfilling his or her role. It's very difficult to be patient when each one of us are not fulfilling what we need to fulfill. Now, what is it that you need to fulfill in your marriage? Well, that can mean different for every couple. Every couple is going to be a little bit different. So there's a diversity in this room today on what your role is. Now let me ask you this, what's your role as a man? What is your role as a man? Well, I mow the lawn. Well, good job, because that's something that you just want to do. Maybe that is one of your roles. maybe I cook in my family. Maybe that you take care of certain tasks in your home, and maybe that is what you do. But here's what I've found out, that in majority of households, not in really a huge percent of the households, the wife does a higher percent of the household chores or task than the man. It's just the way it is. And if you sat down and you said, okay, we want to make this even. Let's do this 50-50. So you sit down together and you start going over all the tasks that you do in the home, and you just split it down the middle. You're going to find out that it's very difficult because there's just a lot of things that the lady does in the home. Besides your job outside of the home, the wife normally does 70 versus 30 of the household chores. 70% versus 30. Now, in some homes it's different. I understand that some homes are different, but the majority, it's usually maybe about 70-30 or 60-40. Now, I've had couples sit down and we do what we call this big pot test, or this pot theory, where we sit down together and we have couples fill out everything that's done in the home, every task that's done in the home. They write it down and then they tear it off in little pieces and they put it in this big pot, so to speak. And then they make a list. They put his role and her role. They pull out one that says, wash the dishes. Who's going to do that? Well, maybe you split that up and you put part of it over here and part of it over there. You pull the next one out, it says mow the lawn. I don't really want anyone else mowing my lawn. I want to run the lawnmower. That's going to be mine. Maybe feed the dog. Who's going to feed the dog? Let's give that to the kids. And if it doesn't get fed, it dies. We don't have a dog anymore. We're good with that. But what I'm saying is we split that up, and what we have found in every couple, what we've found is that usually the wife will end up with a higher percent because it's just the way it is. So it's not to get it even, it's to know what the roles are and what's expected of those roles and what's expected of those tasks, and to follow through and carry those out. There's three things that make it difficult to be patient. The second thing is this: expectations are not being met. Now here's the part of the couple that was in my office when they loved his parents. He loved her parents. She does no wrong. He does no wrong. It was kind of sickening, but really fun, because after you have been in a session with a couple who are screaming and yelling at each other and it's exhausting, then the premarital comes in and it's all fun and games and sweet. He's so sweet. She is the greatest. She does no wrong. And so they go on, and I'm as a therapist, I'm sitting back going, I'm getting ready to rock their world, and they don't even know it yet, because there's things about them, about expectations that we have for our spouse, and sometimes they're not even known. especially at a younger age when they're getting married. You've never been married before, and they're just getting ready to get married, and they're walking into this new world together. If those expectations are not brought up prior to them walking into this journey together, they're probably going to get to a certain point in their marriage where these expectations are going to cause so many difficulties. And so what I do with couples is we sit down and we write out 25 expectations. That's a lot. Very difficult for some couples to sit down and write out 25 expectations that they have of their spouse. This is where this couple came into turmoil. One of them said, I expect us to have 4 kids. And the guy was like, seriously? I was thinking maybe 1. At the most 2. And you think, yes, I want 4 kids. They've never talked about it. So when you get into this relationship and all of a sudden she's expecting 4 kids and you're not even wanting any kids, it could be a problem. So we have this falls along with being. It's difficult to be patient when we don't even know the expectations of our partner. So to know those expectations, finding times where you can sit down and maybe even as long as you've been married now, you're still sweeping some of these things under the rug because that person's not fulfilling that. And it's frustrating to you. It's aggravating that they're not fulfilling these roles and these expectations. And it's something that needs to be brought up because the longer you wait with the conversations, the higher the intensity, the higher the emotions that are connected to not following through and carrying out these kind of conversations. There's 3 primary sources for expectations. What causes you to have the expectations that you have in your life? Well, the first one is family of origin. The first one is family of origin. This is one of the primary sources for expectations. Again, remember when we talked in one of the other sessions about where the cereal box goes. Well, I expect the cereal box goes above the refrigerator. Well, I think it goes in the cabinet below the sink. No, that's where the chemicals go. Really? The chemicals go in the garage. So we see these expectations, and even to the point where I grew up in a home where the husband, when he walked in the house, he was served. Because most ladies did not work outside the home in those days. And I'm kind of dating myself, but back in the old days, they say, back in the old days, a lot of the ladies didn't work. They were just, in fact, during that time, they were just coming into the knowledge of there's more than just staying at home barefoot and pregnant. You know what I'm saying? And so there's more to it than that, and they started getting careers. But until then, these ladies stayed at home, and when the man walked in, everything that was done was centered around him. The kids ate last. The wife waited on the husband, made sure he had eaten. So all these things, and when you grow up in an environment like that, a family of origin, you go into your relationship, and in your mind you're thinking, hey, she serves me. And in her mind, she's thinking, I grew up in a home where my dad was maybe abusive and that my dad didn't take care of the family. And so my view of the man is someone somewhat different. And so when they come into this relationship, all at once, they are in conflict because their expectations are different. Maybe someone grew up in the household of let's just say you have a lazy dad, okay, and then he didn't really provide for the family. So one of the things that was in your heart and in your expectation was that when I get married, he's going to be out there he's going to be bringing home some bacon. He's not going to be sitting around the house. Well, the first time that you take a day off and you're sitting around the house on video games, her expectations are, why don't you go out and do something? You see what I'm saying? So it comes from a family of origin. Or maybe you're in a home where it was just a free-for-all and that you just kind of fend for yourself. No one really did any cooking. However, in that husband's home growing up, mom had that meal on the table 3 meals a day. You walk into that home and the wife's like, hey, you want something? Cook yourself. The expectations. But if you go into the marriage like, hey, listen, I expect this from you, and I expect this from you, that it can be a very aggravating thing to know that we're not fulfilling the expectations. The second primary source of expectations is previous relationships. We're not mind readers. So we sit down together and we tell each other what we expect in a relationship. You say, well, what do I do now? I've been married for 10 or 15 years and now I'm going to sit down and tell them what I expect and what's the phrase? It's going to hit the fan. It's the way we talk about it. These may be some frustration points that you have been dealing with for a lot of years that need to be brought out. You're saying, well, hey, now you're going to cause me to have this big argument with my wife and we're going to end up divorced. If it's handled in the right way, it's, what's this? Communicating the truth in love. We need to know what each other thinks. It's that knowledge that we bring to that relationship. Number 3, the primary source for expectation is culture. Now, this doesn't match us as much as a culture. If some of us grew up in a different country or we grew up, hey, listen, I'm friends with a lot of Hispanic people, and I'm going to tell you, some of my close friends that are Hispanic, they're late to everything. Nothing happens till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Noon is early. And so my expectation here, if I'm of a Hispanic culture, was like, hey, listen, we don't do anything till afternoon. And maybe you marrying someone who was up at what we call the buck crack of dawn, and you start right then. Get out there and start mowing the lawn before the sun comes up. You got headlights, so you see the difference. And so the culture has a lot to do with it. We may not have as much of that here in this room, but culture has a lot to do with it. And so that was one of the primary sources. There's 4 keys to handling expectations. 4 keys to handle these expectations. We were talking about this. It's something we need to communicate with each other. 4 keys. The first key is this, that be aware of what you expect. Have you ever just sat down and thought about, what are my expectations of my mate? What do I expect from them? Because what happens is if we don't really give ourselves this self-talk and understand, yes, I really do expect them to I expect him to always have a job. I expect her to be a great mother to our kid and nurture them. There's expectations that we have, and we need to be aware of those expectations. The second thing is this, be reasonable in what you expect. Don't expect something from your mate that they are incapable of doing. These expectations need to be behaviorally specific. That means that I expect your sister to not ever treat me bad. Well, you know what? They don't really have any control over that. Now, there's boundaries you can set, and boundaries that we can say, hey, let's set some boundaries because I don't want your sister near me. Be best if she didn't talk to me. But for me to tell you I don't want her to treat me bad is beyond my ability. So that's not a good expectation. That's more of a boundary than anything. So we have to be reasonable about what we expect. Number 3, keys to handling expectations. Be clear about what you expect. I've had people fill out these forms and fill out these expectations and they're not clear. And we say be behaviorally specific, but also be clear. And so maybe clarity might be, I expect you to always have a job and get a raise every year. That might be an expectation. It might not be reasonable, but be clear. Just be clear on what your expectation is. The 4th thing is be willing to listen to the Lord. Now, I threw this in here on a Christian level because sometimes the Lord speaks to us about some of the things that we may have in our life, and the Holy Spirit's the best about leading us to the truth and lining us out when we're wrong and lining us out when we're off course. Sometimes we don't want to ask God what He wants because we know the answer we're going to get. So be very adamant about willing to listen to the Lord and pray about it. And I believe that God will help us in so many areas of our marriage. Now, there's 3 things that make it difficult to be patient. We've talked about 2. The third one is the idea that I married the wrong person. You wouldn't believe how many times that I've sat with couples, and usually this is one of the sad things about meeting with couples that are in real crisis. Because usually the only time couples seek counsel is either premarital or crisis. And a lot of times the couples that I meet, there is one of the two that is already checked out. And they'll tell you, the only reason I'm here is to prove to them that I'd show up and show them that this wouldn't work. Well, first of all, there's nothing I can do to help them. And I usually tell them that. But I can't tell you how many people have come up and said, I married the wrong person. At one point, they thought it was the greatest person on planet Earth. They could do no wrong. Their parents could do no wrong. They were sweet. They couldn't get off the phone. You hang up. No, you hang up. All of these emotions and all of these great things were happening for so many years. 10 years, 15, 20 years in the marriage, and I married the wrong person. They have a soulmate mentality. If I would have just married my soulmate, I guess I missed it. I didn't marry my soulmate. Let me tell you this, that the soulmate mentality, the soulmate idea is a myth. There was a Greek god in this myth. There was this Greek god that had all of these little beings running around. They were attached at the back. So if you can imagine 2 people walking up back to back and they're attached. They had 4 arms, 4 legs, 2 heads. They were just attached. And they got too powerful for this Greek god. So he split them right down the back. And they separated and they just bounced through life trying to find their soulmate. That's the myth of a soulmate. Listen, people say this all the time. Oh, our marriage is made in heaven. Your marriage is not made in heaven. Your marriage is made right here on earth, and it's tough. If it was made in heaven, it would be perfect. And how many can raise your hand right now and say, my marriage is perfect? It's not perfect. It's not made in heaven. It's made through the source of God helping us, but it's made right here on earth. And sometimes we say, God help us. See, we didn't marry the wrong person. You married the right person. It could be that you've fallen out of love. Couples fall out of love when they stop doing the necessary things over an extended period of time that shows the other person that you love them. So get the soulmate myth completely out of your mind when we say, well, I think I married the wrong person. Know this, that you didn't marry the wrong person. You're just not doing the little things, the necessary things, over an extended period of time that show that other person that you love them. Now, we kind of, we know this, that we know that we all have needs and wants. There's not a person in here that does not have needs. You need something from the relationship. You want something from the relationship. And you have every right, and you have your position is okay that you have needs and wants. You have things that you need from the relationship. And there's this thing that we call the love bank. And I want you to think about this on a level of your bank account, that if you have a bank account and you keep making withdrawals from it, and you never put anything back in it, pretty soon you're going to overdraft. It's the same way in a love bank, that if we continue to draw from the relationship, and again, we are needy, and in your bank account, you're needy. I promise you, if we looked at your bank statement, there's things on there that you needed, but you've got to put something back in or you're going to withdraw. And so, in our love bank, if we're not adding to it, there's going to come a point where you're going to pull from it so much that it's going to fall apart and you're going to go bankrupt in your relationship. When making withdrawals without making deposits, you will bankrupt your relationship. It turns to a negative in your relationship. And remember, we talked about this, that if your negative gets up too close to the positive and it stays there for very long, there will be failure in a relationship. And there's 4 things that we need to know about deposits in the love bank. And the number one thing is this, is know what acts you can do to please your spouse. What is it that you can do for your spouse that you know will please them? Here's what I tell couples. Every couple that comes into my office, and I've seen many couples over the last several years, I'm seeing some now. When they come in, one thing I ask them is this: are you willing, and you got to get complete cooperation from both parties, and I'll ask them this: can you tell me that you'll do whatever it takes and whatever that person sitting next to you needs? Can you tell me that you can fulfill, and you will fulfill, every one of their needs? Usually what the first thing that happens is in their minds, and sometimes they say it, well, what about me? Okay, let me rephrase the question. Are you willing to do whatever it takes or do whatever that person needs to fulfill their life? Are you willing to do that? Put yourself aside. No, we're not talking about you right now. We're talking about your spouse. You're talking about your mate. If they can tell me, no matter what crisis they're in their relationship, if they can tell me, I'll do whatever it takes to meet their need, then I know I have some hope to help them. But it takes both of them saying that, because one person can't meet the need, because what happens is that person, the other person that's getting their needs met, if they're not depositing, it will bankrupt. So know what acts that you can do to please them. What can I do? What can I do for you? Second thing is ask them. See, here's the thing. It's not what you think you should do. Sometimes we're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do for you. Okay, well, that's all good and everything, but that's not what I need right now. That's not what I need from you. What I need is this. Ask them. I had a lady come up to me one time, and her and her husband were on the brink of divorce, and they eventually got divorced. And she started telling me all of these things that he was thinking. And all these things that he should have been doing. And sometimes people don't like my answers, because whenever I respond to a lot of things, I respond out of knowledge, not out of emotions. See, men are good at that. This is one thing men are really a little bit, they lean more towards responding out of facts. Ladies respond more out of emotions. And so I respond more out of facts than I do emotions, even though I knew this person very well. I knew both of them very well. And she was so concerned about what he was supposed to be doing and what he wasn't doing right, and what she was basically what we call reading the mind, putting words into his mouth and saying, this is what he's thinking. And I said, have you ever asked him? And she got real silent. She goes, well, I just know that's what it is. I said, have you ever asked him? She'd never asked him. She was assuming everything. And I said, ask him. It changes everything, because it's not what you think, it's what they think. Number 3, have your mate make a list and intentionally do one of these tasks consistently. When it comes to a love bank, and we talked about this just a little bit ago, or in one of the other sessions, about the love communicating behaviors, of how you can write these things down. But it goes kind of beyond that. It goes beyond the love communicating behaviors. It's showing that person that you love them. And love communicating behaviors do that, but it's going beyond just putting a Post-it note up. It's going beyond just the text saying I love you. It's going beyond that. But if we write these things down and make a list and intentionally do one of these consistently, it's going to show them and put back deposits into the love bank. Now here's the thing, men. There are certain things that I've heard, and I've heard some comedians talk about this, that there's certain things that will build points for you. And diamonds are one of them. Diamonds will give you a few days extra. But most of the time when you do something nice, it's over by morning. Okay, so you have to remember this. You can't just do one thing nice and it lasts for 2 or 3 weeks. It's over by morning. Now, again, diamonds will last you a couple days. And so just remember and find out what lasts longer. But what I'm saying is you got to do it consistently. You got to show them consistently. Number 4 is sit down together and each person make a list of expectations. We talked about that just previously. Talk about making those lists, but it's something that we have to be intentional about. Sit down together, write out these expectations. I told you in one of the sessions that the element that I believe that's missing in our relationships is the friendship. All these things are great. I teach all the couples these necessary things that we need to do. But I believe that the bottom line is this, that we have to build that friendship back. You're going to hear me say that a lot, mostly in these sessions, is that this friendship is very key to you building a strong and healthy marriage. Because in a friendship situation, when your friendship is deep, when you have a really good friendship with your spouse, you'll be patient. Your patience will last longer. Wherever you're at in that relationship at the time will depend on how patient you can be. And that every person fulfills each role, each expectation. And when we're fulfilling these roles and expectations, the patience is so much easier. Work on it together because it takes two. One person can't be fulfilling everything while one person is not fulfilling their role and it won't work. But you can do it.